Welcome, you're on the Fringe Show. I'm your host, Tatiana Zalan, and I go live every Friday at 2 p.m. Dubai time. The Fringe helps you to navigate the rapidly changing world and increase the odds of your success. Here we discuss technologies, startups, entrepreneurship, and mental models of successful people so that you too can take advantage of the opportunities in the new digital world. It's episode 31, and it's a continuation of my previous show, which was entitled To Metaverse or Not to Metaverse, the question that every business should be asking in 2022. So that's part 2. Just to remind you, in part 1 of the show, I spoke about the opportunities in the metaverse space, direct-to-avatar business models, future of e-commerce and advertising, with examples of fashion and luxury car brands, what they're doing, and what kinds of money as well customers are spending on digital goods right now. Today, the show is focusing on constraints and frictions, with particular emphasis on technological and customer-related constraints. So should businesses jump on the bandwagon? You need to be very careful if you want to go into the metaverse space. There will be also part 3, which will be related or dedicated rather to legal issues and also social acceptability of metaverse. Who is the show for? That particular one. It's useful for entrepreneurs, for marketers, for brands, large and small brands. It's a live show, let me remind you of that. So please let Facebook to identify you. And as usual, a disclaimer, this is not financial advice or any sort of business advice. I'm not your financial consultant and I'm not your business consultant. With that on, let's begin. So just found a very interesting little fact about the vision behind the metaverse. The first Metaverse Roadmap Summit, believe it or not, there was a summit back in May 2007, and that's almost like 15 years ago, envisioned that the internet in 2016, that is 5 to 6 years back, would evolve into an all-encompassing digital playground where that would immerse people in a myriad of highly accessible and on-demand digital information. Well, as we know today, we're 2022 and this didn't happen. So for those of you who are not quite sure what a glimpse into the metaverse could look like, I suggest you watch the film series The Matrix, which depicts a dystopian future where humanity is unknowingly trapped inside a virtual world which is run by artificial intelligence. And another movie that you might want to watch is Ready Player One. Unfortunately, it's also a dystopian movie, and it depicts a dystopian future where people use a virtual universe called the Oasis, right? The metaverse, despite that we are not there yet, the metaverse has undergone a number of transitions, actually 4 transitions to be more precise. We went through text-based interactive games to virtual open worlds, massively multiplayer online games and MOGs, immersive virtual environments on smart mobiles and wearables. And here we are in the current state of the metaverse. So what are the technologies that are enabling the metaverse? I will be drawing on a very comprehensive review that was done by a group of scientists, including from Hong Kong Institute of Science and Technology. It's really great. This has got a very ambitious title. It's called All One Needs to Know About Metaverse. And there is a lot of things here. They're overviewing almost 700 papers and studies and experiments and design, so-called design studies. So there are, and according to them, 8 enabling technologies: extended reality, user interactivity, or what we call human-computer interaction, or HCI, artificial intelligence is there as well, blockchain, computer vision, IoT and robotics, edge and cloud computing, and future mobile networks. So these are the enabling technologies. Now, let's dive deeper into what are the current limitations of these technologies. And we're starting with AR and VR, because they're probably more familiar to most of my viewers. The format here is still highly experimental and reliant on new and emerging technologies. So if you're an executive who is looking to achieve tried and true results, then video game activations and VR campaigns might be too risky for you, given that there are so few brands that have done so and even willing to share the data from the experiments. They're not very open about what they found. On the tech side, there is still a trade-off between AR and VR. AR is much more widely accessible. You can use your smartphone, but VR is much more immersive and promising, and that's why there is this trade-off. There just aren't enough brands out there that are willing to run a VR handset campaign due to the current tech limitations, especially because there isn't a guarantee it will reach critical mass anytime soon. And just like 15 years ago, we were just 1 year away from the full adoption of VR, then 2 years, then 3 years, 5 years. Now we're 15 years later, and it's still not there in terms of technology. And then there are couple of limitations which are related to bandwidth and latency. I'm becoming a little bit more technical here. And again, it's coming from this wonderful, very comprehensive study, but I have to be for users, for people, for executives, for maybe if you're a developer, to understand what the current limitations are. The metaverse will require massive amounts of bandwidth to transmit very high resolution content in real time. Many interactive applications these days consider the motion to photon latency, which is a technical term to measure latency. And it's a delay between the action of a player or a user in, say, in a game, and its impact on screen. And that's one of the main driver, or maybe even primary driver, of user experience. This is why we need to be paying attention to this metric. The throughput needs of future multimedia applications are increasing exponentially. The increased capabilities of 5G have opened the door to multitudes of applications relying on real-time transmissions of large amounts of data. We're talking here about VR, AR, but also cloud gaming and connected vehicles. By interconnecting such a wide range of technologies, the metaverse's bandwidth requirements will be massive. And this is driven by a few factors. One is video flows, and that's accounting at the moment for the largest part of the traffic. It's driven by large amounts of data and metadata that's generated by all these pervasive sensor deployments. And in a shared medium, such as mobile networks, the metaverse will not only require a significant share of the available bandwidth, but it will be directly competing with other applications on, say, on the mobile networks, on the smartphones. So the metaverse's requirements will exceed the 5G's capabilities that are available right now. Another technical limitation related to bandwidth is latency, and latency requirements highly depend on the application. It's typically measured in milliseconds. In the case of highly interactive applications such as online and cloud gaming, 130 milliseconds is usually considered as the highest threshold. Head-mounted displays such as see-through AR and VR and haptic feedback devices have also motion to photon latency requirements, and that's down to a millisecond to preserve the user's immersion. Remember, again, it's all about immersion and high interactivity. And ultimately user experience. Many factors contribute to this latency. It starts with hardware sensor limitations, and probably ends up with computation time. Plus, one of the conditions for the metaverse to really succeed will be the complete coordination of all actors in the ecosystem. And I mean here application developers, internet service providers, and content providers. They have to work together, ensuring a stable, low latency, and high throughput connection. At the moment, 5G can barely address the latency requirements of modern multimedia applications and displays latency, which is far too high for any future applications as well. And once we're on the topic of 5G, I also need to probably mention this. There are significant health issues related to full deployment of 5G networks. And there has recently been published a report Johns Hopkins University in conjunction with University of Washington. They studied the effect of 5G and wireless radiation on animals, and they really warn against it because it may endanger animals. So their experiments were on animals, but I don't think humans are any different. So we have this huge risk there whether 5G is going ahead for a full deployment yet. So that's the technological requirements. Now let's talk about customer audiences and what's happening there on the customer side. Clearly, everybody right now is trying to engage with Gen Z and Gen Alpha because they spend a lot of time on gaming. And for now, platforms like Roblox have very specific user base, in this case, kids and teens. So if you as a marketer are after this target audience, you surely can, reach this target audience with the current technology. The low adoption of VR headsets means that you can be reasonably sure that a VR campaign will be seen only by a highly dedicated audience of very tech-savvy first adopters. And that's probably not quite your audience, because you need to go to mainstream adoption. But there is a belief that audiences will broaden as people get more and more comfortable with the metaverse and the technology becomes more accessible and so on. But what current studies illustrate that the consumers are not ready. There have been a couple of studies, recent ones, that I would like to quote here in particular. One was done by Forrester, it's customer research and just generally research consultancy. In August last year, they surveyed more than 1,200 online adult consumers, both in the US and in the UK, to learn about their current attitude towards the metaverse. So it's quite revealing what they found. Less than a quarter, 23% of respondents in the US and only 70% of those in the UK expressed that they would like to spend some time exploring the metaverse. Most either responded they still don't understand it, that's 29% in the US, 33% in the UK, or they indicated that they have no need for it in their lives. 27% in the US and 36% in the UK. There was another survey done by another company called Klaviyo, and they asked even more consumers, 3,000 consumers across the UK, if they'd like to shop for their favorite brands and products in the metaverse. And the response was also very clear. There are three key takeaways from their consumer poll. Firstly, more than half of people, that's 58%, have no idea what the metaverse actually is. 96% of people aged between 25 to 54 say that they don't plan to spend their cash in the virtual universe. Plus, even the young ones aren't that interested. 93% of people who are aged between 18 and 24 said that they too wouldn't shop in the metaverse. While all these things indicate, this is not to say that the virtual world won't become the next popular shopping destination. It's clear for businesses that there are still a few questions that need to be answered if we want to open up shop in the digital world. Plus, we should also be very wary of the case study that Facebook, with its transition to Meta, provides. You probably are following the news, the business news, and when Meta announced the last quarterly results, after they introduced the shift to Metaverse, they experienced a very large decrease in profitability. When their earnings were announced, their shares dropped by more than 20%. And of course, there are myriads of reasons why this drop in performance, and that includes inflationary pressures on advertising expenditures. Apple is moving to change its tracking mechanism that happened back in 2021. And there is also very serious loss of users in North America, in the US and Canada. And according to Zuckerberg, he said, well, although our direction is clear, it seems that our path ahead is not quite perfectly defined. And mind you, Facebook made $10 billion commitment to this transition to Metaverse. So there are a few kind of red flags there that we need to be thinking about if you're an executive. So if given all these constraints, technical constraints, it's also customer unwillingness to spend money or even be in the metaverse to start with, what should businesses do right now? Because the space is still too nascent and in the very early stages of evolution, you as an executive should remain flexible. Whenever we're faced with technological and market uncertainty, the best way of thinking about it is to adopt the so-called real options thinking, which gives value to flexibility. And in particular, managers should not, or should rather take particular care not to pin too much of their strategy on any particular feature and any particular enabling technology. There is absolutely no need to go into it immediately full on. The day when consumers will carve out significant chunk of their household budget to use real money to buy virtual goods is still a far way off. But there is an opportunity for retailers to give their customers an option to try a digital version of their product. This is what you can do, right? And these digital digital trials rather, may result in fewer returns, greater customer satisfaction, and ultimately less waste. If the metaverse pans out, then great, you will be prepared for this change in technology. Running campaigns with video games right now will let you collect data on how your brands perform with all these gaming audiences. You can also dabble into VR, and using existing VR tech will allow you to preemptively build relationships with developers, and that's absolutely critical if you want to start to succeed in this new ecosystem. And that will put you ahead of the curve when looking to launch campaigns in the metaverse. But even if the metaverse doesn't pan out, then the marketing potential of AR and VR and video games is still worth exploring. You won't be wasting your money in that sense. And brands have indeed pulled millions of engagement on AR filters and visitors into their Roblox worlds. And I spoke about that and Gucci's experiments there that were highly successful. So regardless of the eventual possibility of the metaverse, these are really hard numbers to ignore. At least some category of users are quite prepared to spend money in the metaverse. What else should you do? Well, it looks like the customers are not really educated, and you should educate your customers first. A good place to start is probably to explain the benefits of the metaverse in an honest and transparent way. Hence, educating your consumers is key, and understanding the root of their hesitation is also key. Very important, very critical. You can also experiment with assets in a new dimension. Traditionally, most brands are using 2D assets like photos and videos of their products. And in future, we do believe that 2D assets will not be enough. While we can't predict exactly what the metaverse will look like in the coming months, we know that there will be an increasing demand for 3D assets. So in the short term, you might experiment there as well. These assets may be deployed across the metaverse and shared across various experiences too, from fashion to retail, to real estate, and so on and so forth. So let me give you a couple of parting thoughts here. Clearly, the metaverse is not there yet, so to speak. There are still significant technological difficulties and market uncertainty. Most consumers don't seem to know what the metaverse is doing. They're not ready, they don't need the metaverse to do their shopping, and they don't know what the metaverse is to start with, so you need to educate them. So what should you do as a business? Clearly, perhaps experiment with it, but not go into it full on. Apologies. Now, in the next show, I'm going to talk about other issues related to the metaverse that I didn't cover today, and that's also risks to a certain extent. There are some legal issues and social acceptability of the metaverse. These factors include things like privacy threats, user diversity, fairness, user addiction, cyberbullying, device acceptability, trust, accountability, acceptability of users' digital copies, that is avatars, and green computing, which is designed for sustainability. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm happy you did that. Happy you carved out a little bit of time to listen to this. And I shall see you on the Fringe next Friday at 2 p.m. Dubai time. Bye for now.